On a frosty February morning in 1809, in the rugged backwoods of Hardin County, Kentucky, a boy was born in a simple one-room log cabin. His name was Abraham Lincoln, a name that would someday be carved into the heart of a nation. The cabin was small, rough-hewn from logs, with a dirt floor and no windows. It stood as a testament to the frontier spirit, hard work, self-reliance, and unyielding resilience. Abraham's parents, Thomas and Nancy Lincoln, were poor farmers, their lives shaped by the unforgiving land. They had no wealth, no prestige, and no powerful connections. Yet, from this humble soil, one of history's greatest leaders would grow. When Abraham was just 9 years old, tragedy struck. His mother, Nancy, died from milk sickness, a cruel and sudden illness caused by drinking milk from cows that had eaten poisonous snake root. For a boy so young, the loss was devastating. Years later, Lincoln would remember his mother with profound tenderness, crediting her with instilling in him a love for learning and a sense of moral duty. Lincoln's childhood was filled with chores, chopping wood, plowing fields, fetching water. But he hungered for something beyond farm life. Books were scarce, but whenever he found one, he read it cover to cover, often by the light of a fire late into the night. He studied the Bible, Aesop's fables, Pilgrim's Progress, and even Shakespeare. Each word, each story, expanded his world. In 1816, the Lincolns moved to Indiana, and later to Illinois in 1830, chasing better land and opportunity. The journey was long and grueling, and Lincoln's tall, lean frame became a familiar sight, splitting logs and guiding oxen. Yet his ambition was taking root. At 22, Abraham left home. He worked as a rail splitter, store clerk, and flatboatman traveling down the Mississippi River. That trip exposed him to the reality of slavery firsthand, a sight that deeply troubled him and would stay with him for the rest of his life. By 1832, Lincoln tried his hand at politics, running for the Illinois state legislature. He lost, but his charisma, honesty, and wit began to draw attention. 2 years later, he won a seat in Springfield, Illinois. Lincoln taught himself law, passing the bar exam in 1836. As a lawyer, he became known for his clear logic, humor, and fairness, earning the nickname Honest Abe. It was in Springfield that Lincoln met Mary Todd. She was intelligent, ambitious, and came from a prominent Kentucky family. Their courtship was fiery, marked by differences in temperament and periods of separation. But in 1842, they married. The Lincolns would have for sons Robert, Edward, Willie, and Tad. Only Robert would survive into adulthood, a tragic reminder of the fragility of life in the 19th century. Lincoln's political career took a national turn in 1846, when he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. In Washington, he opposed the Mexican-American War, calling it unjust and driven by the expansion of slavery. His stance was unpopular and cost him political capital. After a single term, he returned to Illinois, resuming his law practice and staying largely out of politics for a time. The peace would not last. In 1854, Congress passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, allowing settlers in those territories to decide whether to allow slavery. The law threatened to spread slavery across the West, reigniting Lincoln's political fire. He spoke out forcefully against it, believing that slavery was morally wrong and incompatible with the principles of the Declaration of Independence. In 1858, Lincoln ran for the U.S. Senate against Stephen A. Douglas. Their debates became legendary. 7. Face-to-face clashes that drew huge crowds. Lincoln's most famous line came during this campaign: "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Although he lost the Senate race, his eloquence made him a national figure. By 1860, the United States was a nation on edge. The divisions over slavery had deepened into a chasm. That year, the Republican Party nominated Abraham Lincoln for president. He campaigned as a man of the people, humble origins, moral clarity, and a belief in the Union above all else. When he won the presidency, Southern states began seceding before he could even take office. On March 4, 1861, Lincoln stood on the steps of the Capitol to take the oath of office. He spoke directly to the South, assuring them he had no intention to abolish slavery where it already existed, but warning that the Union was perpetual and would be defended. Just over a month later, Confederate guns fired on Fort Sumter, and the Civil War began. The war was unlike anything America had faced. Lincoln was thrust into the role of commander-in-chief, navigating not only the battlefield but also the treacherous politics of wartime leadership. He endured criticism, military setbacks, and personal loss. In 1862, his beloved son Willie died of typhoid fever, leaving Lincoln and Mary grief-stricken. By 1863, Lincoln had grown convinced that the war must become a fight for freedom as well as for union. On January 1st, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring enslaved people in Confederate territory free, though limited in immediate effect. It changed the moral purpose of the war and paved the way for the abolition of slavery. That same year, after the bloody Battle of Gettysburg, Lincoln delivered a brief but immortal address. In just 272 words, he reaffirmed America's founding ideals and honored the sacrifice of those who had died. The Gettysburg Address became a cornerstone of American democracy. The war dragged on. By 1864, the strain was immense, yet Lincoln stood for re-election and won. His second inaugural address, delivered in March 1865, called for healing, with malice toward none, with charity for all. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds. The end came swiftly. On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. Lincoln had saved the Union and struck a mortal blow against slavery. Just 5 days later, on April 14, 1865, Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater. There, John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, slipped into the presidential box and shot him in the head. Lincoln died the next morning, the first American president to be assassinated. The nation mourned like never before. In the days and weeks that followed, his funeral train carried him back to Springfield, Illinois. passing through towns draped in black, where citizens wept openly in the streets. Abraham Lincoln's journey, from log cabin to the White House, from frontier boy to the savior of the Union, remains one of the most inspiring stories in history. He taught that leadership is not about privilege or power, but about humility, compassion, and the courage to do what is right, even when the cost is great. His words still echo, government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.